Well, it's 11 a.m., so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar, 15 Reasons Why Metal Parts Rust During Shipping and Storage and How to Avoid Them. So you're listening to me. I'm Kristen, a project manager here at ARMOR, and it's my voice you're going to hear for the next 30 minutes. And my co-host today is Ryan, and he is our industrial sales manager. He is the one who's going to be manning that question and answer box. So he'll write you answers back and collect all the information that you ask for. So for some of you, this might be an introduction or maybe a little reintroduction to ARMOR. So at ARMOR, we manufacture rust removal and prevention products. But our purpose is to protect your brand, your part, and most importantly, your reputation. And how we do it? It's what we call our thing. And again, it's clean, safe, and easy rust removal and rust prevention products. So first, let me give you a little background about rust and about VCI. A little science time. So for those of you who are on this webinar who work with metal parts, you know that you only need 3 things for corrosion or for rust to happen. You need metal, you need air, and you need moisture. So I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to give you the project manager version of forms of rust. But if you really want to get deep into the technical side of rust, or if you hear me speak about a problem or you know of a specific rust problem you are having, type that in the box to Ryan. He will connect you with your local ARMOR rep, or he'll connect you with a specific technical training webinar. I'm going to provide you with just enough information to feel comfortable shipping those metal parts. So the first picture that you're going to see, if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, is red rust. And this is the most common type of rust you've probably seen before. This is the rust that's on the car. This is the rust that's on a metal part that was laying out in the field. And that's because for red rust, you've had an exposure to high oxygen and high moisture. Next, you're going to see brown rust, or what we call ferric oxide. And for brown rust, your metal part was exposed to high oxygen and low moisture, but it's typically you see brown rust in process on a part that was contaminated. So when you see brown rust, you can think of maybe coolant gone bad or maybe fingerprints on a part. That's brown rust. So if you're seeing a lot of brown rust, knowing that it's from a contaminant can help you determine maybe a potential root problem of that rust. Next up is yellow rust, or some people call this orange rust. It's a yellowish orange color, and that means that there's usually high moisture on the part. You'll see a yellow or orange rust when you have a lot of standing water around a part, or maybe you have a part in process that was washed but not fully dried. And a telltale sign of that yellowy orange rust, if you look at that picture, it looks like the rust is dripping or running down your part. And that's yellow rust. And then also sometimes you'll see multiple forms of corrosion on one part. So brown rust that we talked about in the beginning with that low moisture content, most likely that atmospheric rust. Sometimes on a part you'll also see black rust. So black rust means that part was exposed to air but low oxygen. So you'll see that if you think of like a wet paper resting tightly against that metal. And then again, there's that yellow rust, which is high moisture content. And you can see that right on the right-hand side of your screen. But now that we know that there are different types of rust, I think an important question you'd be asking yourself right now is, why do I even care about corrosion? Or you might be thinking, every manufacturer experiences this. So as we said earlier, it's your reputation that matters. And I want to add in this little analogy before we move forward. If you think about a restaurant, and a restaurant that you like to go to, and maybe the owner says to you, well, yeah, we have a little bit of food poisoning, but isn't that part of just dealing with food? I mean, not a ton, but a little bit of food poisoning. You would never eat in that restaurant again. So not only is it your reputation, but it's also the cost. And the best analogy I have around cost is what we call at ARMOR a rust iceberg. We all know that the Titanic sank not due to the iceberg that was on top, but everything that was hidden underneath. So for a rust iceberg, on top you have what are your typical visible costs. We all know that there's a cost of derusting and sorting, but I think what we forget about are all those hidden costs. and I specifically want to speak about an 8D meeting. If you don't know what an 8D meeting, it's just a common term in the automotive industry for the 8 disciplines that it takes to fix a problem. And the 8D meeting is to identify, correct, and eliminate those reoccurring problems. For example, rust. And you know that they're costly because you spend the amount of time with communication in between different organizations, shipping, and reworking parts. So if you are right now on this call and you are the one who is constantly asked to lower the cost of VCI or lower the cost of rust prevention, go ahead and type that into the box right now and say to Ryan, I need the cost of rust video. This video, it's about 5 to 7 minutes long, walks you through an 8D meeting and shows you the entire cost of an 8D meeting and the entire cost of rust. So far, we have talked about corrosion and we have talked about rust and I've talked about food poisoning. But I want to tell you that I'm about to make this presentation a whole lot more optimistic because there are ways that you can prevent rust. And we know that there are multiple ways you can prevent rust. Paint and coatings and oils and RPs and grease. But specifically today, we are going to talk with you about VCI packaging. So you might be asking yourself, if you're new to ARMOR, well, what is VCI packaging? And this slide shows it pretty simply. You need a carrier. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see craft paper, and that's our carrier. And in the middle, you're going to see our VCI, which is vapor corrosion inhibiting nanotechnology. You either coat that paper or you can impregnate that carrier with VCI. And then you have what you see on the right-hand side of your screen, ARMOR Wrap, which is a rust prevention for your metal parts. Here's another example of how it works. We've swapped out that craft paper and we've added poly. So that poly is extruded with ARMOR's VCI. So you take that metal part, you put it into the ARMOR poly bag, and it provides a protective rust prevention barrier on your metal part. You might be saying to yourself, well, how thick is that barrier? Because this is a clean, safe, and easy way to prevent rust. This is not oily RPs. So if you look at the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the ARMOR VCI is 4 to 6 nanometers. To give you an idea of the thickness, a single sheet of paper is 100,000 nanometers thick. So that's how thin that protective barrier is on your metal part. So now that you know a little bit about rust and a little refresher course on VCI, what you came here for, and without further ado, here are the 15 reasons why your metal part could rust during shipping and storage, and most importantly, how to avoid it. So number 15 is your protection radius. And I know that our lab wants me to say it like this, that the corrosion protection radius depends on the vapor pressure of VCI used in the master batch formula. But I'm going to say it in layman's terms. It means put VCI as close to the part as possible. If you're packing parts dense and tight, you could be cutting off the airflow, then you're cutting off your VCI. So a good rule of thumb to keep in mind is about 12 inches. So if you look at this picture, you can see the ARMOR VCI poly bag on the outside. Some parts are in, and then about every 12 inches, we've layered some ARMOR Wrap. Number 14 reason is water variability. So if you and I both know, if your organization uses a public water source to cool or clean parts, chloride and chlorine levels can differ. We know that public water sources contain high chlorine levels and other chemicals that can cause corrosion, and that the pH of public water can vary greatly. So what's your solution? If possible, switch from public water to distilled or deionized water. But if that's not possible, my best advice for you today is log that pH. Check your public water source pH and then start logging it. Because when you log it, if you have a rust issue, you can go back to your log and you can start to uncover if that pH is causing rust. Number 13 is training, which is improper or lack of VCI training and education. So all of us in this webinar, we can't control variable conditions like temperature and humidity and airflow, but we can always control how much information we provide to those who work directly with VCI. So go ahead and type in that box if you want Ryan to send out to your organization the ARMOR VCI usage guide. Also, if you have hourly employees that you want to train, type that into the box to Ryan, and we can connect you with your ARMOR rep and make sure your hourly employees who are working with the VCI have the training. The reason number 12 are oil treatments. Oil is not the best solution for rust prevention. While RP oils are the traditional method of preventing rust and corrosion, we know now that they are messy, they are labor intensive, they are bad for the environment, and they are bad for your employees. And overall, we know that RP oils are less effective than good VCI products when it comes to preventing rust. So if you are thinking to yourself right now, and how, as I mentioned in the beginning, nobody can see the answers but Ryan and I, if you think, wow, we use a lot of RP oils at our company, go ahead and type that into the box to Ryan. He'll connect you with your ARMOR sales rep, and they can work with you on an individual case-by-case basis about transitioning from RP oils to either VCI in a paper, poly, foam, or liquid form. Number 11 is acidic packaging. And I find number 11 fascinating. And that is because all forestry-based products, whether that is your pallets, your wood, your paper, your corrugated boards, they contain moisture and acid and chlorides that can cause contact corrosion, resulting in rust that's for direct contact with those parts. So a little tidbit from today's webinar, a clue that you can take with you, is if you look at your parts in shipment and some are rusting and others are not, it might be due to the moisture from the forestry-based products you are using. So the easiest solution, if you look at no on the left-hand side and then yes on the right-hand side, is to make sure you've lined your boxes or crates with a VCI poly bag or VCI paper. This will create that effective barrier between your metal parts and that wood. Number 10 is just a proper amount. So not using enough VCI packaging or not using it to its fullest abilities. So if you look at that picture on the left, you know with VCI that internal space around the part needs to be saturated with the VCI. And if that is not happening, then it's not going to work. So the customer could make a simple fix in moving from an ARMOR poly bag to using a bonnet. And the way I like to think of a bonnet, it just reminds me of a shower cap. Same thing that happens on the right. In the second picture, you could do something more efficient by having just the VCI in the bag, that you could add layers of VCI paper around or into those tubings. So that reason number 10 is just the improper amount of VCI. Number 9 is poor quality. It's a use of an ineffective or less of a quality VCI product. Now, when you look at this lovely picture on your screen, this is an example of a lab test. But what I want you to remember from this is that not all VCI is the same. And I think the best way to remember this is an analogy of buying a used car. So I go and buy a used car. I go to the seller and say, okay, tell me about this car. And he or she says to me, well, I've just put new tires on. And I think, great. And then I drive away, and about 7,000 or 8,000 miles later, I realize, these treads are worn out. These tires are not great. And in that moment, I realized there's a difference between generic tires and a good Michelin brand tire. The same is true for VCI. So it's important when you're looking at VCI that you choose a quality VCI. Number 8 is temperature. Failure to maintain proper temperature for metal parts. So in the beginning, we did a little science with the colors of rust. This is just a little math for you. I want you to keep in mind, for every 10 degrees Celsius, there's an increase in temperature, corrosion rates can double. So the solution to this is pretty straightforward. Maintain lower temperatures and lower humidity levels by installing climate controls and air conditioning, dehumidifiers if you can. But an even simpler solution is make sure you package parts in areas away from dock doors or other parts of the plant that can experience temperature swings. Another little tidbit I want you to take from this webinar is if you're bringing parts in, make sure you let those parts acclimate to the warmth of your plant while they're still in their VCI packaging before you open that packaging up. So number 7 is contamination, leaving metal parts uncovered or unprotected. On the left-hand side, you see no. On the right-hand side, you see yes. So leaving parts uncovered while they're sitting in a plant or waiting for that secondary operation, maybe they're just waiting to be in drilling or taping or whatever the next part is going to be, cover those parts. Things that you might not even think about are contaminants that are getting on the parts are things like forklift exhaust. So again, it's a simple solution. Cover all metal parts with VCI paper or VCI polybags, protecting them from those contaminants that are in your plant. Number 6 is pH level. It's important to know the proper titrations of bath. So this slide right here from the lab just lets you know that for ferrous parts, a pH level of 9.0 should be maintained. For non-ferrous parts, such as a copper and an alloys, your pH level is usually around 7.0, but 7.5. But what I want to say to you today is make sure you check your in-process fluid suppliers for the proper usage for the metal that you're using with your bath. And then regularly check and log and maintain those pH levels. Number 5 is, again, improper usage, and now this is just incorrectly using VCI. It's a little bit of a combination of some of the other topics we've talked about. Wanted to give you 2 more common examples of improper usage of VCI, and this is on the right-hand side. You can see the VCI is on the outside of the box, and then on the left-hand side, you can see that the customer hasn't fully closed the VCI. Number 4 is condensation. So when we think about humidity and condensation, we normally think about the environment that we're working in. But I want to remind you to think about the environment inside the packaging. And I think the best example of this, you'd have to kind of close your eyes and think about returnable trays. And think about maybe 5 or 6 returnable trays all stacked up on top of each other. Where those handholds are, that creates what we call a chimney effect inside of packaging. And all that means is inside that packaging, air is flowing up and down, the temperature is flowing up and down, it's creating humidity, and then it's creating condensation, which is then causing rust. So an easy way to get rid of that chimney effect is to either line VCI paper in between each returnable tray, or take VCI paper and just shove it down into those handholds, because what you're trying to do is block that airflow. So again, you want to think about that condensation humidity in your environment, but you also want to think about that inside of your packaging. So the number 3rd reason is handling. Remember when I talked about brown rust with a contaminant? Here is a picture of that brown rust. If you look at the left-hand side, you see a no, which is a fingerprint. And then if you look at the right-hand side, you see a yes, which is someone wearing a glove. An interesting tidbit to take away from this webinar is that women's hands are more acidic than men. So maybe you have a new rust problem because you have someone new who's on the line. So a good piece of advice or best practice is anyone working with metal wears gloves, and that those gloves are frequently changed, because dirty gloves are just as bad as having fingerprints on there. Could be even worse with contaminants. Number 2 is making sure that you dry those parts that are coming out of any coolant baths or solutions. Again, going back to that knowledge you learned in the beginning about yellow and orange rust, if you see that yellow and orange rust, again, especially looks like it's dripping down the part, you know that you probably haven't had that part dry enough before packaging. few things that you can do. One, put it in a wire basket, or you can make sure that it's force dried. Or if you don't have time to do that, always important to add desiccant. So it's a new product for some of you on the webinar today, but it's ARMOR Smarty Pack, which is a combination of VCI and desiccant. So go ahead and type into that question box to Ryan if you want more information about the ARMOR Smarty Pack, or if you're really seeing a lot of orange and yellow rust on your part. And the number one reason that we see rust are dirty conditions. So what do I mean by dirty? I mean swarf. So if you think of sawdust and you're cutting a piece of wood and all that sawdust, that's pretty common. We all know what that is. But sometimes we forget in the world of metal carbon makes something called swarf. And swarf, which is its version of sawdust, likes to form that galvanic corrosion cell, and it likes to cause rust underneath. So the number one reason are those dirty conditions. And then also, as I talked earlier about the pH and the titration level of your baths, it's important to keep in mind that those baths can cause dirty conditions. And I want you to think of it like this. When I'm at my house and I'm just feeding the 4 or 5 of us here at the house and everyone picks their plates up and comes to the sink, I fill up my sink one time with water, I can wash all those plates, and I can put them away and it's fine. Well, then I have Thanksgiving and I've got grandma and grandpa and everybody else over at the house. I get through maybe about 10 plates and I look down and my sink is disgusting. At that moment, I let all the water out and I fill it back up again. The same thing needs to happen with those baths. So we have walked through 15 reasons why these parts can rust during shipping and storage. But the next step that I want you to do is be able to take some time and look at our website. You can look on our website to find specific products and specific needs that you might have. I also invite you to take this time, and I know I'm biased because I work at ARMOR, but I think it is the best corporate video out there. So take some time and look at the ARMOR corporate video just to learn a little bit more about ARMOR. And I've also mentioned these individuals who are here to help you. These are your technical resources. They have the knowledge and the skills to talk with you about your specific rust issues and talk with you about how you can use VCI to fix those problems. So if you look on the screen right now, there are certain states that they're located in and cover, but we have a coverage over the entire United States, whether it be an inside sales consultant or whether it be one of the people that you see on the screen coming to your area. And also, if you look at the right-hand side, we have Canada covered and internationally we're covered. ARMOR has 25 global partners around the world, so you can speak with Sweden, Canada, or Fernando for any international questions that you have. So what we wanted to do for the last few minutes is really open this up to you for any of your specific questions. So go ahead and in that question box, take a moment and write down any questions you've had about what I've covered, or just any questions you might currently have about ARMOR. And then I'll turn it over to you, Ryan, when we see those questions starting to come in.
All right. Thanks, Kristen. We have, as you're writing out your questions, we have ARMOR swag bags and some literature and some product we'd like to send your way. So if you could, please put your physical address in that questions box and send it over if you want that swag bag. If you're like us working from home for the next few weeks, please put your home address because we're going to get those out in the next week or so. As far as an update on ARMOR, where we stand with the coronavirus, Michigan was shut down on Monday. And ARMOR is deemed an essential business, so we are still up and running. 95% of our office crew is working from home, and we have the remaining production and shipping staff still up and running on a skeleton basis. And so we're able to get orders out. If there's any needs that you guys have, we're still up and running. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Or to place an order, you will receive your product in the same time frame as you would have before. So I see some addresses coming in. Thanks for sending those over. We'll definitely get those swag bags out to you. One question I see here, Kristen, do we have a guide or a 15 for the 15 reasons maybe bullet pointed out if they wanted to share this with their teams?
We do. So watch your email. We not only have a guide that'll be coming to you, we'll have a link to a landing page that will have this session recorded, and it will also have some of the other items that I've touched on throughout the presentation coming to you. And then also, once you receive that, or now, anytime, if you thought of any questions that maybe didn't have a chance to ask during the presentation, or maybe later this afternoon, something I mentioned spurs a question, always just reach right back out to us and we will get you connected with your ARMOR rep and get that answered for you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us, and look forward to working with you.